So we're beginning today where we left off back on January 27th with that census data example. So go ahead and download that, and that's where we'll start. So I guess that's in my downloads somewhere. Oh, it's probably right here. Downloads. All right, so the content for today is really working with other built-in collections inside of Excel. The collections we've dealt with so far have really been two. Like with your collection of cells that make up a range. We've played with collections in that way. And with just a kind of a regular collection object. But what we'd like to see today is working with the collection of all the workbooks that we have inside of Excel that are currently open, as well as all of the shapes that are on a worksheet. And so these are other kind of collections that can be really handy to know about. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time in class with them, but today I'm going to get you exposed to them just so you'll know, hey, yeah, we've been there, and if you need to go down that road, at least you've got a foundation to work from. So here's the context. So right now, we've got it to where the user can configure a few different counties to look at the data for. Say show data, and it brings in that, the data for that particular county and lays it up here where the user could then, look at it and compare a couple of counties. It takes the data that's really ugly to look at and makes it so you could, reasonably, do some analysis with it. The trouble that we have with it right now is that, once I've put up a few counties, if I say, you know what, that's good, I've got that county analysis, and now I'd like to do some more on a different set of counties, I've got to essentially write over the top that I've got here. And so we'd like to be able to create the functionality that says, listen, when you're ready with this, click a different button and it will take this worksheet and make a new workbook with just this worksheet in it. And so that's the task for today. And we'll do some other things along the way. So let's take a look. Let's begin by recording a macro of how we would actually move a worksheet or copy a worksheet to a new workbook. How do you do that in Excel? And what's the process in Excel to do that very thing? Yep. Yeah, you right-click the tab, and you choose Move or Copy, and then you say Create a copy. Where do you want to put it? Into a new book. So that's the process. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and start ourselves doing that. Seems like it's got to be some hideous long line of code to make that happen. Let's give it a shot. So I'll click on Record. Did I ever show you this? You can record right here. You don't even have to go to the tab. You can just click Record. You're recording. I'm going to call this Copy Sheet to Book. And I won't put a hotkey on it. That's fine. Oh, so the source file that we're on today is from January 27th. It's where we left off on January 27th, so it's called Census W16A. .xlsm. All right, I'm recording, but I haven't done anything yet. So I'm just going to right-click my tab, choose Move or Copy. Now it wants to know where I want to move it to. I'm not going to put it before any sheet here. Instead, I'm going to put it into a brand new workbook, and I'm going to create a copy. And we'll say OK. There we go. So now I've got that sheet open, and so I'm ready to stop recording. Now my little stop button shows up down here on the status bar as well, so I'm in pretty good shape. And I can close this book one. I don't really need that workbook. I just needed to record the code, so I won't even save it. All right, so let's take a look at the code that we recorded. Macro 1, that's not it. It's probably in Module 3. Copy sheet to book. Yeah, here it is. So we're selecting that sheet. This is interesting. Active sheet dropdowns .select. I'm really not sure why it recorded that. In fact, all this first three lines, I don't know why I recorded it at all. We don't need that at all. We didn't add any buttons, so it's kind of strange that. You're probably says this. And I'm not sure why it does. That's interesting. Anyway, this is the one line that we're after. It's just sheet.copy. It turns out that there's another argument you can put here. It doesn't come up, but you can give it a reference to a sheet that you want to copy it before or after. So you can say, yeah, I want this to be copied before this sheet, and it'll put a copy over there. But if you don't tell it where to copy it, it has no choice but to make a brand new workbook and put it in that workbook. And so that's it. So that should copy that. Let's go ahead and make a button that does this, and then we'll play a little bit with this collection of worksheets that we're getting to have multiple copies of. So I'm going to come to my Developer tab and open my toolbox and bring in the first one. So this first little tool is the button tool. So I'm going to draw that button on. It's going to say, which one do you want to run? I want to run copy sheet to book. And maybe I'll just put copy to book as the label. And so now by clicking on this button, it should make another copy of that. So there's book number 2, copy to book. There's book number 3. And I'll do it a couple more times. Copy to book. There's book number 4. So I've got all kinds of these workbooks open now. Well, not all kinds, 2 kinds. One that's the original one, and 2 that just have, or 3 that just have the sheet on it. Okay, so far, almost everything we've done in this class has just assumed that we're dealing with the active workbook. In fact, if I'm referring to a particular sheet, and I don't tell it what workbook I'm talking about, it's going to figure you mean the active workbook. But it's totally possible to have code running in one workbook that affects a different workbook. And if that's the case, I need to be a little more careful about how I refer to objects, because it may not be the active workbook that I want to be manipulating. And that's going to be the case for an example later on today. So let's take a look at what this Workbooks collection looks like. So here in my immediate window, I'm just going to kind of look at the collection of all my workbooks. Here it is. It's called Workbooks. It's a collection, so it has a .count property. So there are currently 4 workbooks in my Workbooks collection. Why is there 4? So which 4 are they? There are way more than 4 workbooks on this machine. There's hundreds of workbooks on this machine. So why does my Workbooks collection only have 4? It's a collection of open workbooks. If the workbook is saved to disk, Excel has no idea that it exists. It's not until it's actually open that Excel goes, oh, I get it, that's a workbook. Yeah, I could do something with that. And so the Workbooks collection is the collection of the workbooks that are currently open. Now, it turns out that it's actually a method of the application object. So I can say application.workbooks.count. And so if I don't tell it application, it goes, oh, you probably mean the Workbooks collection of the application. But what this may suggest to you is that there could be more than one copy of the Excel application open. We're not going to cover it in this class, but it's possible to say, you know what, I've got one copy of Excel over here, another one over here, and this one has a collection of workbooks, this one has a different collection of workbooks, and so we can even manipulate them at that level by saying, a different reference to an application object, beyond what we're going to cover. But go ahead, question? So the question is, could we do something here? It really is, does copy return a value? Yeah. Does it return a reference to something? Here's how you tell if something returns a reference. I'll just come up here and I'll say I want to see the type name of this. If it returns a reference to something, it'll tell you what type it returns. So type name, and then I'll execute that. And if it returns a value, it'll tell me it's a workbook or a worksheet, or it'll tell me an error if it doesn't return a value. Okay, so it looks copy returns true or false as it's returning a Boolean value. Do you see it? So it does return something, but it sounds like it's just returning it. I'm not even sure what it means. I guess if it's successful, I've never seen it fail. So if we were to just print that out, let's see what it returns. So it returns true. So we're not going to be able to just set an object variable equal to the copy statement and be able to hook up to what was copied. but that's exactly where we're headed. We still can't do it. It's just not that particular way that we can do it. Okay. Is there a worksheet data type? The answer is yes. There's a data type called worksheet. We're not going to bind to the worksheet that's created. We're going to bind to the workbook that's created for this example. All right, so I now have, yikes, I got 6 workbooks open. That's going to be a little bit confusing. Let me come back here. Let's just do it one more time and take a look at what happens. So, think of this as if you're my mother, who's might be watching this sometime. Lovely lady, just not really very good with Excel. She's good as far as she goes, but doesn't go very far. How do I say that more politically? I'm not sure. Let's watch what happens if I just say copy to book. All right, I just copied it. Now, do you see a problem with this interface? I just clicked on a button right here that says copy to book. Is that the same button I'm looking at now? No, because you'll notice this is book 7. What's going to happen if I click copy to book here? First of all, is there any code in this new workbook? There's no code. That code was not part of the worksheet. If there was code built into the worksheet and I copied it, the code would go with it. But this code isn't in the worksheet. This code is in a general module. What do you think? What's going to happen? Here's A, nothing's going to happen if I click copy to book. B, it's going to have an error. C, it's going to work. It's going to go ahead and copy it. Those are the 3 choices. Let's vote. Who says it's not even going to work, there's going to be an error? Who says it's just not going to do anything? You voted for the last one, too. I said, oh, you changed. I switched the order. Sorry about that. And who says, yeah, it's going to work just fine? Oh, I tricked you. It's none of those. Let's take a look what happens. How could there really be another choice? Copy to book. Loop. Oh, I didn't want to do that. I want to say show data. Okay, so show data. Yeah, the copy. Oh, did it really? Yeah, sorry, wrong button. I was talking about this button. Sorry, yeah, okay, you're right. So whoever said it's going to work just fine is right. Okay, let's look at show data now. I want to click on show data. So I want to show Osceola, Florida again. Bloop. What did it do? First of all, it didn't error, so that's good. Did it do anything? It just kind of looks, it looks like it's taking enough time. It's happening long enough you can see the little hourglass go up. Let's take a look. The question is was it doing it to the original book? Yeah. So it put all that data in there. So the only difference between what I just did and what my mom did, she would have done it 100 times or more, just to make sure it really wasn't ever going to show up. Right. And so, in fact, this code, when it runs, when I click on the button over here, it's invoking the code from the original workbook. It's just saying I'm trying to run a procedure called, I forgot what it's called. Let's just take a look. I'm trying to run a procedure called show data values. And it's going, is there a procedure called show data values in any of my open workbooks? And it goes, yeah, there is. Great, run it. There's only one. It's easy to pick. That's the one I want to do. There's only one. Run it. And so the fact that it's in a different workbook, totally irrelevant. Because any code is available if it's in an open workbook. Yeah. If I had the original workbook closed, would it give me an error? Or would it just run it? It should give me an error. So it should say I'm trying to run this macro, can't find it, no can do. So here's the idea. The idea is that when we've got, if we think about, now this workbook, book 8 here, it's got nothing but a comparison tab on it. There's the source data is not here. There is no hope that these combo boxes or these buttons are going to do anything worthwhile because the source data they depend on is no longer here. And so the idea is that we're saying, listen, get the set of counties that you want to compare here, and then make a copy of it. But at that point, that book shouldn't be dealing with any of the data. So we're going to get rid of these objects off of the sheet. So that's our goal right here. So I'm going to leave these other workbooks open, even though recognizing it might really make Excel less stable. I don't know. I'm going to save. And then let's come to the code. Okay, so here we're saying copy. What I want to do first is I want to be able to get a reference to the workbook that just got created, so that I can say, okay, I've got a reference to this workbook, and I want to manipulate something in that workbook. I want to be able to get a handle to it. So to do that, we're going to be dealing with the workbooks property. Now we should know that there's probably 9 or 10, there's 8 workbooks open right now, and I can refer to one of those just by putting its number. So let's do number 8. And we can ask for the name of that workbook. It tells me that's called Book 8. Very original. Or I could ask for information about a particular sheet, because we've played with a collection of worksheets before. So I can say I can ask for the count of the worksheets in that number 8 workbook. And it should tell me there's only one, because we copied that over. There's only one worksheet there now. But if I look at the number of worksheets in workbook number 1, that's the first one that was opened, it tells me I've got 8 worksheets on that workbook. And if I go back to that one, I should be able to count them here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I guess that's all that there are. So I can say, find that particular workbook, then find that particular worksheet, and then go to a particular range on that worksheet, and boom, just do it. Don't have to activate it or anything. I can just refer to it and manipulate that value. Yeah, so the question is, so what does the ordering mean here? And the answer is, it's the order in which they were opened. That's right. Yeah. We'll find out how we can reliably refer to the workbook that currently has the code in it, which is the one. There are 2 that you're often very interested in. One, the workbook that has this code in it, the one that I'm actually my application, and 2, whichever one is active. There are shortcuts to get to those 2. We'll see them here today. Okay, so how could I refer to the most recently opened workbook? Any thoughts? Doc Active Workbook will show me the active workbook. It's not it's just whatever the active workbook is. That's right. So when that workbook gets created, it will be both the most recently opened one and it will be the active one. But if we change it to something else as active, someone else will become the active one, and we'll still want to know which one was most recently open. So let's take a look at how we might do that. Oh yeah, go ahead. Yes. Application is not needed here. And I'm going to take it out just because the line's getting kind of long. So instead of, remember, we can ask for the count of the workbooks. That's 8. That will be the number of the most recently opened one. So instead of having a number here, I can put the count in as that index, and that will just say that is the most recently opened workbook. That's how you say the most recently opened workbook. So let's use that to be able to refer to that workbook. The workbook that gets created right here, we want to be able to have a handle to it, so let's see how to do it. All right, so I'm going to declare an object variable. I'll call it WB, short for workbook. We'll start off as object, but we'll change it here in just a minute. So somebody tell me, what is that doing when I say dim WB as object? Does it declare allocate a lot of memory, like enough for a whole workbook? Workbook could take a lot of memory, couldn't it? It's got formulas and data, and some of these things are huge, they're like hundreds of megabytes. So does that allocate a lot of memory, or does it allocate a tiny bit of memory in the back? That's right. It's just enough memory to hold the address of where the workbook's located. That workbook is going to be in memory somewhere. We want to be able to record where it is so that we can use this variable name as a reference to that workbook. That's just the case of all object variables. If instead of saying object here, I say workbook, then it's exactly the same thing, except the only kind of object I'm allowed to bind this variable to is a workbook object. If I try to bind it to a range or to a worksheet, it'll say, sorry, no can do. So, and the nice thing about binding it to the particular kind of object, now when I'm working with this, the IntelliSense will come up. I can say WB dot, and it goes, it's a workbook. Here's what you can do with a workbook. So that's really the reason that I like to give it the actual type of variable, type of object I'm going to connect it onto. So as soon as we copy this, I want to bind the workbook variable. So I'll say set WB equal to workbooks.count. And that will bind it on to that newly created workbook. As was mentioned earlier, there's another approach to this, because as soon as that gets created, it's going to be the active workbook. And so either of these two approaches will work, because when that workbook gets created, it will be the active workbook. So either one is fine. Yes? So the question is what's happening here that workbooks.count just always returns the number of workbooks open. That's correct. And since the index number for this collection starts at 1, then it's exactly parallel. If it started at 0, we'd have to offset it, right? So if I've got 5 workbooks open, they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so count would return 5. The last one open would be number 5. And so I can plug count into the workbooks collection. And it says, yeah, that's the most recently opened one. The question is, really, we have to say set here? Can't we just say workbook equals active workbook? And the answer is, we have to say set. It's the syntax that we use when we're connecting up an object variable to an object. And the reason that we have to do that is because many objects have a default property. So a range has a default property. If you want to refer to a particular cell, and you say, you know what, I just want to see the active cell's property. Let's see. So here I am on Osceola. If I just come here and say print the active cell, what do you think it's going to do? I'm telling it to print a reference to an object. Can you print an object? Objects are a really complex thing. In some environments, if you say print the object, it says, well, I've got a method that I know how to, I know how to kind of can print some of the data in here, or maybe it's what you're looking for. But in VBA, there's no way to print an object. So what's going to happen if I say print the active? I want to print the value, is what I'm trying to get at. But what happens if I just say print the object? Yeah, it says you can't print an object. And so range objects have a default property. And so if you just refer to the object, it goes, oh, you must mean the value property here. I always try to put the property in that I'm talking about, so you see it object.property. If I ever do that, without say print active cell, it's a mistake for me. I always want to say the property, even though it's deterministic, right? It's always going to be the value if I don't say value here. That's part of the philosophy of the language. That we're saying, Professor Allen's mother might actually try this someday, and she'd like to be able to print the active cell without ever really even understanding that there's an object and a property involved. And so it was just a design decision. They said, listen, if you're going to be binding object variables onto objects, you're smart enough to do this right and to understand there's a different syntax. And so they're putting the burden on the higher end users and helping it to work for the lower end users. That's why we have to use the word set here. It's because anytime we bind an object variable onto an object, we've got to tell it we're not trying to refer to the property.
So I guess it's like an explicit way of saying binding an object variable.
It's an explicit way of saying I am binding an object variable onto an object. Yeah, and what it comes down to is that this could be, instead of being an object type, this could be a variant type. And as soon as it's a variant, the interpreter doesn't know. I mean, you might look at this and say, the interpreter should be able to figure that out. This is an object. It's an object variable. It's defined right here. It should figure that out, but it doesn't. And there are two problems. One, it could be a variant, so it wouldn't know. And two, it could be of type object. That doesn't answer it. Never mind, just the one. It's just it's the variant problem. There might be something else. Okay, so now once I've got that, I can activate a different workbook and still have a handle on to that workbook. And in fact, even if something else happens somewhere else, the user adds a new workbook, I will still have this variable bound on to that particular object. I mean, it's going to lose its scope by the time we get to the end sub, but if I had it declared out here as part of the module, then it would. But we're going to work with it all right here. Okay, so now what I'd like to do, the first problem is that, you know, when my mom hits copy book here, I still want to be showing the main workbook. I don't want to be showing the copy. But I can't avoid it. When I make that new, it will become the active worksheet. So what I'd like to do is I would like to go back to what was active before. And in this case, I gotta get back to my code. So in this case, the book that I want to be active is the one that has this code in it. In fact, even if someone comes over here and clicks copy book on book 9, I don't want to come back and activate book 9. I want to activate the base one, the one that has the code in it. And so fortunately, there's a shortcut to that. So just like I could refer to the active workbook, I can refer to, let me go ahead and activate a different workbook. So here, book 9 is now active. And if I print the active workbook's name, it'll tell me book 9. There's an analogous one that refers to the workbook that's holding the code. It should be like workbook that has the code, dot name. But it's not. It is this workbook. So even though the active workbook right now is book 9, this workbook, dot name, is going to return the name of the workbook that has the code. So this workbook is a shortcut that just says, give me the workbook that's got the code that's currently executing. Seems a little bit strange because where is the code that's currently executing up here in the immediate window? Which workbook is this code stored in? None. So it seems a little bit weird that it even works inside the immediate window. But it's like going, well, that's the last one you were working with, so I guess that's the one you mean. Yeah. So the question is, well, what if I have 2 workbooks with code in it? And the answer is that line is going to be in one of those workbooks when it's executing, and it will refer to the workbook that has the code that's executing at the time that line gets evaluated. So here's what we're going to do. Instead of setting WB equal to we're going to set WB equal to the active workbook, and then we want to activate the workbook with the code. So this workbook dot activate. So now when I invoke this procedure, it should make a copy, it should set the it should bind that variable onto it, and then it should activate this workbook. So let's see if it does it. Oh, here's book 9. It should work from book 9 too. I'll say copy book. It makes a copy of it and then activates back to census W16. And so this workbook is a really powerful thing to have. In fact, anytime you're working with code that says, you know what, there could be more than one workbook active. I've got more than one workbook happening here. User might have another workbook open. Kind of a good idea to say, this workbook dot whatever. All right, so now what I'd like to do is I would like to say, here's book 10. I want to get rid of these buttons off of the workbook. Let's take a look at what I'll have to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and put a breakpoint here, and I'll run this code yet again. Never had so many workbooks open. Well, truth is I've had more, but not many. All right, so now I put the breakpoint on the end sub, and so This whole procedure has run, all the code here has run, but everything is still in memory. So WB still evaluates to something. I should be able to ask for the name of WB. What do you think the name is going to be? Should be book 11. Just created a new one. 10 was the last one that I had open. So I can use WB to refer to that workbook, even though it's not the active workbook. It doesn't hold the code. It's not the active workbook, but I've got a handle hooked up to that workbook. I can use that to identify it. So I want to get to the worksheet that's there. How many worksheets are in that workbook? There's only one. I know exactly where it is. It's the number one worksheet. So WB gets me to a reference to that workbook that was just created. Worksheets now is going to get me to the collection of worksheets. I could ask for the count. Only one there. If I want to get to that, refer to that particular one, I will just say worksheet number 1. That's now a reference to that worksheet. If I wanted to see what was in cell B2, I could just say dot range B2 dot value, and it will tell me what's in that particular cell. I don't have to activate the sheet. I don't have to select the cell. Just refer to it, and I've got it. But this is now going to get me to another collection. So each worksheet has a collection of shapes that are on the worksheet, and it's called shapes. So instead of range, I will say shapes, shames, dot count. There are 3 shapes on that sheet. Any thoughts on what they might be? 2 buttons and a drop-down list. And so they're sitting there in a collection called shapes. Anything that I put on top of it, not in a cell, but sitting on top of the sheet, it's in the shapes collection. A chart is actually in a shape. There's a shape there, and then there's a chart inside the shape. So anything you put onto a sheet is in a shape. Is there a question in the back?
Ran into something on the assignment. So I've seen it says
So the question is there some way to use a for each loop to iterate across this set? The answer is yes. Let's take a look. So let me go ahead. To do that, I'm going to create a shape variable. Similar to this workbook variable that I'm going to connect onto a workbook, I'll want a shape variable that I can connect onto each one of these shapes in the collection. So let me just dim SHP as a shape. And now I will say for each SHP in that set of shapes. Next, debug dot print name. So I'm sorry, say the question again. Shape here. Shape is an object, it's a type. Shape's a type. And so I'm creating an object variable called SHP that is of the shape type. Again, it's an object variable. It's just enough memory to hold. It's just enough memory to hold an address to another location in memory. But it's only going to be allowed to hook up to shapes. In fact, if I try to connect it onto the active workbook, set SHP equal to active ACTIVEWORKBOK, I'm going to say, not what I expected it to say. Oh, down here, this needs to be SHP.name. But this, should say, again, not what I expected it to say either. Just ignore that for a minute, probably because it doesn't know it's been created yet. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to say, listen, I've got this variable, I've got this collection of shapes. These shapes are all somewhere located in memory. Each got an address. And then I've got this shape, this SHP variable sitting right here. This loop is going to connect the shape variable onto each one of those shapes individually. So the first time through the loop, the shape variable connects to the first shape. Second time through the loop, it refers to the second one and so forth. So even though I'm only ever saying SHP.name, the first time SHP is going to refer to one shape, the next time it'll be a different shape, the next time it'll be a different shape. It should print 3 different names when I run this loop. Let's see what it does. So there's the names of them. Drop down 1, button 2, and button 3. There we go. So now when I try to execute this and I try to bind SHP onto an object of type workbook, it gives me a type mismatch. It says you just can't, they're the wrong type. You can't connect up a shape object variable to a worksheet object. Okay. So yes, you can iterate across a collection of objects in this way. In fact, we need to iterate across this collection of objects. We want to delete them. We want to get rid of them. So let's give it a shot. Here's the thing that seems like it would make sense. Don't print it, just delete it. shp.delete. This is going to go bad in a very big way. I'm going to make sure I save before I run this. All right, so I'm deleting the first one. Let's just take a look and see if it deleted. Whoops. There it is. It's gone. My combo box is there. It's not. It's gone. I deleted the combo box. So far, so good. We're on book 11. Go through again. Delete the next one. What do we got? That's kind of interesting. It deleted the first one that we created, then it deleted the second one. Actually, I was really expecting this not to work. I'll be surprised if it works. Color me surprised. Deleted them all. That's a great way to do it, apparently. The concern is if you iterate, well, my concern was I thought I've tried this in the past and something similar to this and just had it fail. Let me show you what will definitely fail. There's another reasonable way to do it. So another way to do this, instead of using the shape variable to iterate across it, let me just dim x as an integer. Comment out this block. And we can do something very similar here by saying for x equals 1, 2, shapes.count. So now shapes.count is 3. X is going to iterate from 1 to 3 and refer to that particular shape, number x dot delete. I'm going to go ahead and run this code again, put a breakpoint here, and we'll look at it. All right, so I've created a new sheet. It actually has those shapes. If we look at the shapes on it, we'll see that there are 3. Oop. Oh, not worksheets 1. Oh, darn it, I deleted the wrong ones. I deleted them off my census sheet. No, I didn't. What have I done? Oh, that's probably why it worked. No. Interesting. This ought, oh no, that's worksheets 1, that's right. WB.worksheet. Let me just, all right, folks, I'm just confused for a second. Stand by. So that's book 12. Let me look at book 12. They're already gone off of book 12. Why are they gone off of book 12? Oh! No, I think they're still there. Here's the original one. All right, let me stop this code. I'm going to push the button on the original one. Copy to book. Here is book 13. Okay, so they're here on book 13. Presumably book 13 is the one we're hooked up to. All right, I'm not sure what I did wrong over there, but now we're here. Okay, so if I was just to iterate across this and actually show the names of them, so instead of saying .delete, I say .name and I say print. This should work exactly the same. It should show the names of those sheets. There they are, drop down, button, button. But now let's go ahead and delete them. Okay. Excel has stopped working. I just tried to execute a line. Seems like I saved not too long ago. We'll see just how long ago I saved. Microsoft Excel is trying to recover my information. I don't really want it to try to recover my information. Automation error happened, okay. I always have a little moment of hope, like maybe it really isn't dead, but it is. Probably do that on purpose. Oh no, it's opening them all. No, I didn't. No, it's not going to work, but I expect it to have an error, a runtime error, rather than to crash. We got them all recovered. That looks fabulous. How long ago did I save? Oh wow, look, that's pretty good. I got my, oh, it might have been a recovery, I don't know. All right, so all we did from here was dim x as an integer. X equals 1, 2, the count of my shapes. Let's see, when we printed it, we saw that it printed. And so let's just go ahead and try to delete these. WB shapes sub x dot delete. I'll put a breakpoint here, and maybe I do. Yep, shapes dot count, thank you. And then shapes x dot, that should be okay. Save. Come back to my census, copy to book. Okay. So let's just check and see what WB is looking at. It's now called book 1. That's probably okay. Yep, here's book 1, the one that we've just created. All right, so how many shapes are there right now on that sheet? Oh, 0 because I deleted them. Let's comment this part out. Save again. Stop this. Run it again. Cross your fingers so that it doesn't crash. Ultimately, we're going to be closing these workbooks, so I want to leave them open. Okay, so right now, count of those shapes should be 3, right? Yeah, they're all 3 there. So we're going to execute from 1 to 3, and we're going to delete that shape. So let's go ahead and do it. Shift F8. Deletes the first one. Okay, let's take a look at it. It deleted the number 1 shape. So far, so good. Let's go through, get to the next one. That line deletes okay. And whoops. Here's book 2. We're down to just 1 button. How many shapes are in that collection right now? 1. I am about to tell it to delete X number what? I'm about ready to tell it to delete the 3rd shape in the collection. How many are there? There's only 1 right now. I deleted 2 of them. And so this is going to say, sorry, no can do. I'm going to save just for kicks. Shouldn't crash. Index to the specified collection is out of bounds. Tried to look at shape number 3. There's only 1 in that collection. Can't do it. So I'm going to end that code. And I'm going to leave this commented out because this is the wrong way to do it. Oh yeah, how about if we just went backwards? What if we went from 3 down to 1, and then we could delete number 3, then there's still 2, I delete number 2, then there's only 1, I delete number 1, that would work. There's even a simpler way to do it. Instead of deleting sheets sub x, I can just delete sheets sub 1. This is going to iterate 3 times, it's going to delete the first one each time. So yeah, either of those 2 approaches would work to fix that problem. But it looks like this one's doing the trick for us, so I'm going to go back to this one. and save. Okay, so that's pretty good because now then I've got, oh, it failed here. Let's go ahead and run it one more time so we get a clean copy. Show data, copy to book. So I'm back here on my census 16, but if I go to that sheet that was just created, book 3, here it is. Those tools are gone. Makes sense for them to be gone because the data that supports them isn't in this workbook. So far, so good. All right. Next thing I'd like to do is I would like to set this thing up so not only does it create it, but it saves it. And for that, we're going to need to ask the user, where do you want to save the thing? So this should be something very familiar to you, having done the homework. Either familiar because you figured it out and agonized over it and typed it, or you found an example online and copied and pasted. Either way, you should have some degree of familiarity with it. Function. I'm going to make a function that's just going to, I'm going to say I want to get a path from the user. It's going to pass back a path. I will call it get folder path. I'm going to pass it nothing. Maybe I'll pass something later to it. It's going to return a string. I will dim fd as a file dialog. I'll set my file dialog equal to application dot file dialog. And then I've got to tell it which one I want. Whoops, not file converters. Application dot file dialog. Which one do I want? I want the folder picker. I'm going to pick a folder where they want to save the file. Then I will show it, fd.show. That's actually going to show the dialog box to the user. The user selects it. Then the value is going to be in something called selected items. So fd.selected items sub 1. The whole idea here is that the file dialog, you can select multiple things. I want this file, and this file. And so instead of just having a value that's the one selected, it's got a collection of which one's selected. And we're not telling it to allow multiple selections. In fact, we could expressly deny multiple selections. fd.allow multi-select equals false. So before we open it, if we tell it we're not going to allow multi-selection, you can only select one. It's still going to return it in this collection of selected items. And so I'm going to set the name of my function equal to that, and that should be the return value. So if I just print the results of this function, it should open up the file dialog box once I get the error taken care of. Oh, this needs to be after I've created the object, but before I show it. So it's bringing up that file dialog. It's actually the folder picker. I can choose my downloads folder, say OK, and it has printed out the path to that particular folder. Well, it's kind of nice. Now I can just use that function and it works. But what happens if the user presses cancel? I decided not to do it. Cancel. I get an error. Why do I get an error? I'm asking for what's ever in the number one position of my selected items. How many items are there in my selected items? 0. I'm asking for number 1 in a collection of 0. No can do. So we'll just use that to decide if the user selected something. So we will say if the count is greater than 0, then we want to bind on that name we want to bind on whatever they selected onto the name of our function. If it's not greater than 0, meaning it's equal to 0, we'll skip by that line. What's it going to return? Yeah, if I don't tell it what to return, it returns the default type of the data type. So now it should not error out anymore, but it should just print an empty string, which is what it does. Okay, so that's a handy little function now. I can just call that function anytime I want to get a path from the user. So we're going to do that. As soon as we say copy this thing, we're going to ask them where they want to save it. That's reasonable. So I'll declare a variable for that. I'll call it folder path as a string. I'll just say folder path is equal to get folder path Now, what should I do if this comes back as an empty length string? If the user clicked on that button, said I want to copy this to a workbook, we ask them where they want to put it, and they press cancel, what should we do? Any thoughts? They clicked a button, and then they said cancel. We're going to show them who's boss. Run that thing again until they pick something. I like that. No. Yeah, we don't want to do anything. We want to be out of here. So we'll just do this. If folder path equals a zero-length string, it means the user pressed cancel, then exit sub. We're going to skip by the rest of it. We're never going to copy it. We're never going to do all this other stuff. Let's give it a shot. Let's see if that part works. We'll come here. We're going to say copy to book. It says, great. Where do you want to copy it? Changed my mind. And we're out. Didn't make a new copy. Nice. All right. Actually, I think we can even, it's been a while since I've done this part, but let's take a look at it. Oops. I think we can even specify a title here. And then again, before we show, we can say fd.title equals title that we passed in. So this variable title will get put onto the title of the dialog box. So I can say pick a folder to save the workbook. I think this is right. Let's give it a shot. If not, we'll go delete it out. Copy to book. Looks like it's working. Pick a folder to save the workbook. Now the user knows what they're choosing here. And it's not actually saving it yet, but we've got a variable that has the path where the user is selected. Okay. Whew. You ready to save it? Let's save the workbook that they just created. What are we going to call it? Let's just make a composite name out of the counties that they have selected. I got too many here. Let me get rid of some of these. So what I want to do is I just want to look right here, and I want to say we got Osceola Franklin Escambia. That's going to be Osceola Franklin Escambia.xlsx. That sounds like a fine name for it. So we're going to have to calculate that as well. Stand by. We've got a folder path. Now let's create a file path. Let's call it file name as a string. And if we've made it this far, they've picked the folder. Let's go ahead and build the file name right here. Let's see, we've got x already, so let's set x equal to 2. This will be column 2. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start right here in this column, and I'm going to go across as long as I have data. That'll be a problem. It won't be a problem. That'll be okay. Okay, so I'm going to do until. I'm just going to assume the active sheet cells row 2 column x dot value is a zero-length string. We'll come in here and put we got to increment x. And then we're going to say that our file name is equal to what it used to be, concatenated with an underscore character and then whatever value we're currently looking at. So first time will be a 0-length string. So we got nothing. We'll put an underscore and then the county name. Underscore county name, underscore county name. That would work okay, but what's going to be the first character of the file name? Underscore. That's a little bit unsatisfying. And so when I'm done with that loop, I'm just going to say, you know what? File name is equal to the mid of the file name, starting at the second character. Remember, if I use the mid function, I don't tell it how far to take, it'll take the rest of the string. So I'm saying skip the first character, look at the second one, take everything else, and that'll get rid of that initial one. In fact, why don't we concatenate onto it at this point, .xlsx. We're going to want that as part of the file name. Question? Would this be a problem if it gets past 255 characters? There's going to be some length limit on the name of the file. Yes, you're absolutely right. We'll solve that a different day. That's my nice way of saying we're never going to solve it. I will leave that as an exercise for the interested student. There we go. So, have you ever read that in textbook? Old textbooks used to do this all the time. Here's another interesting question. I'll let you figure it out. Is there a question? Nope. Okay. Okay, so now we've got a folder path. We've got a file name. That's pretty good. Now we're going to go ahead and create it. So we're going to copy it. We're going to delete the sheet. We're going to delete off the sheets. At this point, we're ready to save the thing. All right, so let's save it. Here we go. We're going to refer to that workbook. Well, I've got a variable for it, wb dot save as. Then I just got to give it a name. Pretty easy. In fact, maybe even before I get here, I'm going to combine these two values that I've got, a file name and a folder path, into one. So I'm just going to adjust folder path. Folder path is equal to what it used to be, concatenated with a backslash. And I could just put a backslash in here, or I can say application.path separator. That way, if this ever runs someday on Mac, it'll still work because it'll be a different backslash, be the forward slash instead. And my file name. So now I can just say save as folder path. And that should save that workbook in the location the user chose with the name that's defined by the counties that were picked. Question in the back. Oh, could we do all that right here? And the answer is yes, but knowing that we've still got a little bit of this example to do, I want that file name. For something else, I want that file name to be just the file name. But you're right, we could have put that all together here for what we're looking at. Let's run it and see what we got. Let me save it first. And then we'll come back and give it a shot. So I'm on my regular census one. I should get something called Osceola Franklin Escambia. That might be an example I did last period, so let me delete that and add something different. Come down here to Utah. URSTUV Millard County. Millard County there, show data. All right, so we got Millard here now. Millard Franklin Escambia. Copy the book, let's see what we got. Oh, please work. Ooh, next out of 4. What I got wrong here? What should this be? You. And continue running. Where do you want to save it? I want to save it in my downloads folder. Okay. Looks like it ran okay. Let's see if it's named. Yeah, here it is. It's called Millard Franklin Escambia.xlsx. And if I look at my downloads, should be there. There it is. Millard Franklin Escambia.xlsx. Looks pretty good. So far, so good. Question? If I didn't specify the .xlsx on the end, what would it do? The answer is, I don't know. I will leave that as an exercise for the interested student. Okay. So what's going to happen if I try to run this again? The file already exists. Let's run it again and see what happens. So here's census, copy to book. I'm going to come here and choose my downloads, say OK. Holy cow, you cannot save the workbook the name of another open workbook. It's not a problem that it's actually on the disk. The fact is it's already open. How am I going to save? I can't save this. I'd have two workbooks open with the same name. That's against the rules. I got to anticipate that. So let's give it a shot. Debug. I guess I'll stop that. So before I say save, here's what let's do. Let's go ahead and say we want to, if we're trying to save the file and there's already one with that same data, blow the old one away. If it's open, close it. Don't save the changes. We're making a new one. Is that necessarily always the right approach? No, you might, if you're trying to save a file that already exists, you might want to let them know and let them pick. But we've got approximately 4 minutes to go of class. We can't do all that. So let's just say we're just going to blow it away. Sorry. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, let's just do it this way. On error, resume next. On error, go to 0. GOG 0. Fo2, go to 0. All right, so I'm just going to want to try to close the file. It turns out that asking if the workbook is open is a little bit involved. The only way I know how to do it is to loop through all the open workbooks and see if the name of that workbook is already open. So we're not going to do it. Instead, I'm going to say, I want to close that workbook. So workbooks, sub file name. Here's where I wanted that file name already. Dot close. Now, if it's been changed, when we get here, it's going to prompt, you've changed this. Do you want to save it? No, I'm about to write right over the top of it on the disk. The next argument here is save changes. I'll say false. Don't want to save the changes. Let's close it. Don't save the changes. Don't prompt the user. I had a student once who wrote a macro that did that. Closed the active workbook, didn't save the changes, didn't prompt the user. He was kind of a wise guy. He assigned it to a hotkey. Can you guess the hotkey he assigned it to? Control S, yeah. And by the end of class, he went to save his own work and accidentally dumped it all off, so that was kind of good. Oops. All right, but that's okay because we're getting ready to write over the top of it. And so now, let's just go ahead and we're still going to have the problem where if we try to save it and it's there, I think we're going to have a collision. That's okay. Let's just kill the file that's there. Just delete it off the disk. Kill. That's how it sounds so gruesome. To delete the file, the keyword is kill. Kill folder path. Remember, folder path at this point has our full thing. We've built the file name into it. So we're going to close it, then we're going to kill it, and then we're going to save the new copy right over the top of it. Well, won't be over the top of it because it will have deleted it. That's pretty good. So I think that'll work. Let's go ahead and run it. And there's one more exercise that I wanted to get in here today. And I think we probably still have time to do it. So let's run this. I'm going to save it to exactly the same place. Copy to book. Put it to my downloads. No error. Opening it. Now called Franklin Millard something. Don't crash Excel. Stay with me. And we're in good shape. And if we check the file, now 442, and that was saved at 442. So that's the brand new file that was just saved. So we successfully closed the one that was open, saved this one with that name, put it where the old one used to be. Okay, here's a last thing that would be great to do. It would be nice if we could say, you know what, I got a bunch of workbooks open. I want to close everything but this workbook. We're going to have to make a loop that goes across all the open workbooks and then closes every workbook unless it's the workbook that we're currently on. So, sub, close all but this. All right. Dim x as an integer. For x equals workbooks.count to 1 step -1. Now, we want to know if the workbook that I'm currently looking at through all that collection is the same as this workbook. And it turns out there's a handy way to do that. If workbooks sub x, that'll be the workbook that I'm currently looking at in the loop, workbook sub x, is this workbook. When I have two object variables, they're both referring to a location in memory. If they are referring to the same location in memory, then one is the other. They is each other. And so this will be true. If it's any other workbook besides, if it's pointing at a different location in memory, this is going to be false. And so what I want to say is, let's see, when they're not, when they is not each other. Is not. Can't put the not there. This whole thing is going to be true or false, and so I reverse it out here with not. If not workbook X is this workbook, then I'm ready to delete that workbook. And I'll just do it right here, workbooks. Work BOOKS sub X dot delete. Hey, viewer 5 has left the meetings. Who's checking out early? Hey. All right. So, oh yeah, I'm trying to close them. Thanks so much. That's why there's no delete. Close. Save changes. Yeah, let's go ahead and save changes. True. Now, this is going to have a problem if it hasn't ever been saved. It won't know how to save it. It'll probably prompt the user, so I think that'd probably be okay. Let me save and give that a shot, and that'll conclude us for today. And let's just see if I'm going to breakpoint so we can kind of see it go. Closing them one at a time. Looks good. Oh, here's one that didn't have, oh, a bunch of these probably don't have names yet. So it's going to prompt to save them. Save it and close. Yeah, most of these don't have names yet, so I'm going to have to sit here and close each one of them. So we'll call that good for there. Any questions? In the back? Yeah, I'll do that when we're done. All right, thanks for coming. Class dismissed. Remember, the homework that was due Saturday is now due a week from Saturday. I'll update you when I think it's safe to work on, that you don't blow your brainstem trying to figure out why you can't get to the page. Class dismissed.